All right, strap yourselves in for this one because we are diving deep into a true crime story that'll leave you wondering about how the world really works. We're talking about the case of Teresita Basa, a respiratory therapist in Chicago, murdered back in 1977.
It's a case that seems impossible to solve at first. No leads, no suspects. The police hit a dead end until an unexpected twist changes everything.
That's putting it mildly. Believe it or not, the key to solving this case came from something straight out of, well, you could say a supernatural thriller.
It's one of those stories where you have to ask yourself, is this real life or is this something out of a movie?
So let's rewind to the beginning. Who was Teresita Basa?
Teresita was a dedicated respiratory therapist at Edgewater Hospital. Everyone who knew her said she was kind, caring, devoted to her patients. She was loved by her colleagues, her friends, a real pillar of the community.
It's just tragic to think that someone like that could be a victim of such a violent crime. So what happened? What do we know about the murder?
In February 1977, Teresita was found murdered in her own apartment. It looked like there had been a struggle, but the police were baffled. There were no witnesses, no signs of forced entry, and no obvious motive. The case just went cold.
So how did this seemingly impossible case take such a bizarre turn?
That's where it gets really interesting. We need to introduce Dr. Jose Chua and his wife, Remy Chua, a couple living in Chicago. Remy started experiencing these really vivid visions and trances.
Visions, like seeing things.
Right, and during these episodes, a voice would start speaking through her, claiming to be Teresita Basa.
Wait a minute, a voice claiming to be the victim.
You heard that right, and the voice was pleading with Dr. Chua to help bring her killer to justice. Understandably, Dr. Chua, being a surgeon, a man of science, was very skeptical at first.
I can imagine. Trying to reconcile scientific thinking with what seems like, well, a paranormal event happening in your own home, that must have been incredibly difficult.
It must have been. But here's what's so compelling. Despite his initial doubts, Dr. Chua decided to reach out to the police.
That's a big leap of faith. He must have been at least somewhat convinced by what his wife was experiencing. So what did the police make of all this?
Detective Joseph Stachula, the officer assigned to Teresita's case, was desperate for any kind of lead. But even he was pretty surprised by Dr. Chua's story. Despite his skepticism, he agreed to hear Dr. Chua out.
Okay, so what kind of information did Teresita reveal through these trances? Was it just vague feelings, or did it get more specific?
It gets very specific. That's what's so intriguing about this whole thing. The voice actually gave the name of the alleged murderer, Alan Shorey, and even described the jewelry that had been stolen from Teresita's apartment.
Hold on, so it's not just a name, it's stolen items too.
There's more. Teresita even provided details about where she had gotten the jewelry and how her relatives could identify it. Incredibly specific information. If it was true, it could crack the case wide open.
This is getting really intense. So what happened next? Did the police actually follow up on these leads?
They did, but very carefully. The police started a thorough investigation, but they were cautious. They needed to make sure they could corroborate this information, which came from, well, such an unusual source. They needed solid evidence to build a case.
I can see why they'd be cautious. So did they find any connection between this Alan Shorey and Teresita?
It turns out they did. The investigation uncovered that Shorey had actually worked with Teresita at the hospital and lived nearby, just as Teresita had said.
Wow, it's like the pieces of the puzzle are starting to fall into place, but from a totally unexpected direction. What about the stolen jewelry? Did that turn up?
And this is where things get really dramatic. The police found the jewelry, exactly as described by Teresita through Remy, being worn by Shorey's girlfriend.
You're kidding me, that's crazy.
To be absolutely sure, Teresita's relatives were contacted and they confirmed the jewelry was indeed hers. It was the crucial piece of evidence linking Shorey to the crime.
Oh, it's just unbelievable. What was Shorey's reaction when he was confronted with all of this?
At first, of course, he denied everything. But with the mounting evidence and Remy Chua's testimony, he finally confessed.
Wow. What was his reason? Why did he do it?
He admitted he went to Teresita's apartment to fix her TV. But then, he was desperate to pay his rent, and in a moment of desperation, he robbed and killed her.
That's chilling. To think that someone Teresita trusted, someone she considered a friend, could betray her like that. So we've got a confession, but I'm guessing this case didn't end there.
You're absolutely right. The confession was just the start of another crazy chapter in this story. The trial.
Okay, now I'm really hooked. Tell me more about that.
This is where the trial becomes this incredible battle between logic and the seemingly impossible. Shori's defense attorney, as you can imagine, really tried to poke holes in the investigation, focusing on, well, how unbelievable Remy's vision sounded.
I can see why the defense would go that route. But how could they explain away the specific details, things that could be verified?
Well, that's what makes this case such a landmark case. The defense attorney argued that the whole thing, Remy's trances and all that, was just psychic mumbo-jumbo and shouldn't be admissible in court. He actually said that, as far as he knew, no one had ever been convicted based on such evidence.
I bet the judge had something to say about that.
Oh, he did. He had a famous response. He simply said, yes, until today.
Whoa, that's a pretty powerful statement. He basically acknowledged that this case was unique and that they were in uncharted territory. So what happened? What was the verdict?
The jury, it seems they were really swayed by the evidence and maybe even by the judge's words, and they found Shori guilty of Teresita's murder. But get this, there's another twist. His sentence was incredibly lenient, only 14 years, and he was paroled after only 4.
What? Only 14 years for murder? That doesn't seem right, considering what he did.
It's a detail that a lot of people who followed the case were really puzzled by. Some people speculate that maybe the judge took into account that Shori confessed and that he had no prior criminal record, but it's hard to know for sure.
Just another layer of complexity in this already bizarre case.
Right. So, here we have a solved murder case. Seems pretty open and shut, but it leaves us with a lot of questions. How could Remy have known all those details about the crime? Details that led directly to Alan Shori being arrested and convicted.
You've got me thinking now. This is where we go from a regular true crime story to something, well, truly unexplained. Could Teresita Basa somehow have communicated from beyond the grave, to get justice for herself?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It pushes us to think about things that defy our conventional explanations.
I want to hear more. What are some of the other theories about how all this happened?
Some folks have suggested that there might have been a connection between Remy and Teresita that they weren't even aware of, something subconscious, maybe through a shared experience or a mutual acquaintance.
Interesting, like some kind of hidden link they didn't even know about. Any other explanations?
There's also the theory of what they call psychic detectives, people who are said to have some heightened senses or abilities to tap into information that's hidden from most of us.
So like a sixth sense or some kind of supernatural ability.
It's a possibility, but here's the thing. There's really no solid scientific proof to back up these theories, but there's not enough to disprove them either.
So we're left with this really intriguing idea, something that seems almost impossible. But trying to explain it with logic and science, well, it just doesn't quite fit.
Exactly. That's what makes this case and others like it so fascinating. They make us question what we know, what we think is possible.
It makes you wonder what else is out there. What mysteries haven't we even scratched the surface of?
It's a really humbling thought, isn't it? For all our technology and scientific advancements, there's still so much we don't know. When you really think about the Teresita Basa case, it really challenges the way we try to explain the world. We like to think we've got it all figured out, and then a story like this pops up and throws everything into question.
Yeah, it's kind of like looking through a broken lens, isn't it?
Mm.
Our whole view of reality changes, and suddenly we're questioning everything we thought we knew. So let's get back to those other explanations we talked about. You mentioned a possible subconscious connection between Remy and Teresita. What would that look like?
Imagine maybe they bumped into each other at the hospital, or maybe there was someone they both knew. It's possible there was some shared experience, even a really brief or seemingly unimportant one that got stuck in Remy's subconscious mind.
So you're saying it's possible some buried memory or connection could have triggered these visions, even if she wasn't aware of it?
Exactly. Our minds are incredibly complex, and we're only just scratching the surface when it comes to understanding how the subconscious works. Maybe Remy was accessing information that she didn't even know she had.
Okay, now that's a really interesting idea. But could that really explain all those details Remy gave? Names, dates, even specific descriptions of jewelry? That's a lot to chalk up to subconscious whispers.
You make a good point, and that's why we have to look at all the possibilities. Another theory is the idea of what some people call psychic detectives. Now, this is where things get a little more controversial.
Psychic detectives. Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about them. What are they supposed to be able to do?
People who believe in this theory say that certain individuals have a special sensitivity, or maybe an ability to tap into information that most of us just can't see. It's like having an extra sense, a way of experiencing a world that's beyond our normal senses.
So like some sort of sixth sense.
Something like that. But the problem is proving it. The scientific community is really split on whether psychic phenomena is real. There's no hard, solid, repeatable evidence that proves it without a doubt, but then again, there's no real proof against it either.
So we're left with this idea that's so compelling that there might be more to our reality than we know. But when we try to apply logic and scientific methods, it all seems to just slip away.
You've hit the nail on the head. And that's why cases like this are so captivating. They make us confront the limitations of what we know, the edges of what we believe is possible.
It makes you wonder, what other mysteries are hidden out there, just waiting to be uncovered? What else don't we know about the world?
It's a humbling thought, realizing that even with all of our technology and science, there's still so much that remains a mystery.
You know, something's been on my mind. What do you think about the judge's decision to allow Remy's testimony? It was a pretty unprecedented move, and it ultimately led to Shori's conviction.
That's a great question, and it really touches on some fundamental legal and ethical dilemmas. On the one hand, our justice system is designed to be based on solid evidence and reason. Traditionally, information that's considered psychic has been viewed with a lot of suspicion, often seen as too unreliable to be used in court.
Yeah, it's often viewed as too subjective, too difficult to prove or disprove.
Exactly, but then you have this case where information that some might consider paranormal actually led to the arrest and conviction of a murderer. What if the judge had thrown out Remy's testimony? Would Shori have walked free? Would justice have been served?
Now that's a scary thought. It's a real moral quandary. Do you weigh the need for reliable evidence against the risk of letting a guilty person get away with murder?
Exactly. It's a tough call.
What about Shori's sentence? What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it was fair, considering the crime?
Shori's sentence has definitely caused some debate over the years. 14 years with the possibility of parole after just 4 does seem quite light for taking a life, especially in such a brutal way.
I agree. It doesn't seem like true justice was served, even though he was found guilty. Do you think maybe the judge was influenced by the unusual nature of the evidence, the paranormal aspects of it all, when he decided on the sentence?
It's certainly possible, maybe even subconsciously, the judge felt uneasy about relying on information that was obtained in such an unorthodox way. Maybe he felt he had to balance out the sentence because of how unusual the case was.
It's really interesting to imagine how the judge must have wrestled with all these conflicting ideas, the need for justice, the evidence presented, and then the absolutely unprecedented nature of the case.
It shows that even our legal system, which is supposed to be all about logic and precedent, can be confronted with situations that just don't fit neatly into any category. The Teresita Basa case is a perfect example of how the line between reality and the unexplained can become blurred, forcing us to really examine our assumptions about truth and justice.
It's definitely made me rethink a lot of things, and that's what makes deep dives like this so fascinating. They push us to expand our understanding of the world and to really grapple with ideas that we might never have considered before.
You're absolutely right, but we've only scratched the surface. In part 3, we're going to delve even deeper into the implications of this case and explore what it might reveal about the human mind and all the mysteries that are still out there.
Can't wait. This is getting really good. So we've gone through the twists and turns, the Teresita Basa case, the impossible leads, the conviction, and that surprisingly lenient sentence. Now I'm curious about the bigger picture. What does this case say about, well, the world? About us?
It really makes you question everything you thought you knew about how things work, right? It forces us to at least consider that there are things going on that we just don't fully understand.
It's like the case is saying, hey, wake up. There's more to this world than you think. Don't be so quick to dismiss things just because they seem impossible.
Exactly. It's a reminder to stay humble. What we consider impossible today might be scientifically proven tomorrow. What we know is constantly changing, and this case really highlights the mysteries that are still out there beyond what we currently understand.
What about you? What do you personally take away from this case? After diving deep into all the details and the different theories, what sticks with you the most?
You know, as someone who really relies on evidence and logical explanations, this case is a real puzzle. The level of detail that came through Remy's trances, it's really hard to just write it off as coincidence.
It definitely makes you think. So where do we go from here? How do we reconcile these seemingly impossible events with our need for a rational explanation?
I think the key is to keep exploring, keep investigating with an open mind. Cases like this should be inspiration to really dig into the mysteries of consciousness, you know? Imagine what we could discover if more research was dedicated to understanding the full potential of the human mind.
So we need more scientists and researchers who are willing to look beyond the traditional ways of thinking to explore these uncharted territories.
Exactly. We need to encourage curiosity, open-mindedness. We need to be able to ask those tough questions and consider ideas that might seem unconventional without being shut down. Who knows what amazing discoveries are waiting for us if we're brave enough to step outside our comfort zones.
I love that. Teresita Basa's story, as tragic as it can also be a wake-up call, can't it? It pushes us to broaden our horizons, to think about possibilities that we might have rejected before.
It's a powerful reminder that learning and discovering is a journey. It never ends. And sometimes the most profound things we learn are the things we least expect.
Well, we've looked at the facts, the evidence, and the different explanations. Now it's your turn. What do you make of all this? Was this a spirit finding a way to get justice from beyond the grave? Was it a series of unbelievable coincidences? Or was it something else entirely?
Whatever you decide, let this case be a reminder that there's so much we still don't know about the world. There's a whole universe of incredible things out there waiting to be discovered, but we have to be willing to open our minds and never stop asking questions.
This has been an amazing deep dive into a case that just keeps on fascinating people. Thanks for joining us. We'd love to hear your thoughts, your theories, anything you want to share. Until next time, keep exploring the mysteries of the universe. And remember, sometimes the most incredible stories are the ones that are true.